Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about Total War Warhammer 40k. And the kind of things that Creative Assembly has talked about in their roundtable discussion on what they're trying to do with the game. Now, one of the most talked about subjects in that roundtable discussion was with regards to essentially an army painter or unit customization. And this is something that apparently is going to be available for every single race in the game. So it's not just going to be Space Marine, it's going to be Eldari, it's going to be Greenskin, it's going to be the Imperial Guard. Now, the focus from Creative Assembly on an army painter is a bit interesting, suffice it to say, because there's been many games that have had that level of customization available to them long before Total War 40k. Strategy games, RPGs, you name them. Shooters even. My view on this discussion is that, yes, there is an element of it where Creative Assembly is trying to appeal to the people who play tabletop and really like to customize their own factions or their own chapters or their own armies. Absolutely. The more cynical part of me is going to say that this is how they're going to sell skin packs to players. Because of course you will probably have a similar situation to some extent Space Marine 2, maybe minus the progression of that, who knows. But you will probably have various colors, various options for heraldry, etc. But then, like Space Marine 2, and this may be a Games Workshop decision for the record, not necessarily a Creative Assembly decision, though, of course. Sega would be very happy about this, undeniably so. So would CAB. But they're going to do those special kind of skin packs with various chapters, so Space Wolves, Blood Angels, Imperial Fists, but that's going to come out later. Now, of course, they may pair some of those, depend on what we're talking about, with actual Legendary Lords, characters, faction packs, like a Blood Angel DLC, an Imperial Fist DLC. That could very well be the case. But I also assume that there will be certain chapters that will just have skin packs. And look, this is how it goes. It is ultimately a business, and the good news of Total War 40k is there's not going to be a blood pack for it, so we've gotten rid of the blood tax after so many years. Truth be told, we kind of got rid of it after Warhammer 1 came out, because yes, there were other games, of course, that had it, but every single one of those failed. Yes, and I do include Free Kingdoms, because ultimately CA canceled it for a reason. But they obviously don't want to have that happen again for 40k and Medieval Free. And they're also not going to do pre-order DLC. It, of course, doesn't come freely, so they're going to adopt a new business model. Now, how do I feel about it? Honestly, I think it depends on how they do it. Look, I'm going to say it outright. If they pair it with proper DLCs as a kind of benefit to get people to buy those DLCs, but, you know, we get Legendary Lords and all that, I kind of don't care as much. But if they're just selling, I don't know, $5 skin packs, then, yeah, that is just Creative Assembly looking to make a cheap buck. Of course, the upside of Creative Assembly monetizing the game like this is they would have an actual incentive structure to constantly be patching and updating the game. Because this is the thing about live service games, is that you want people to constantly be engaged and buy stuff. That means that the core gameplay must actually be good. So that is a core discussion on that. Again, could end badly. We've seen it go badly before in many games. Could be a kind of incentive structure for things to go well. Because, look, I'm just going to give the example of Space Marine 2. That game is monetized all the way. But it also has constant updates because of this exact reason. It's not the only one. So if that's the business model, I mean, it could always be improved, sure. but it could be a way for Total War to be done in a better fashion. Now, on top of that, the second thing that they talked about is how campaigns are going to play. So they've talked about the idea of crusade theaters, where you're going to select a certain type of mission, if you will, or certain type of campaign. So you got short campaigns, longer campaigns, decisive battles, right? Now, my perspective on these things is that it is a great way to allow a wider variety of types of campaigns in the game. What do I mean by that? Look, there are people who really like the idea of a Total War campaign, starting from scratch, playing 100 turns, and just, building a massive empire. Personally, I don't really care for that, because ever since I've played Total War, and I've played it for 20 years, I've always felt that the meat of a campaign happens within the first few dozen turns. Now, of course, there is the question of how you would manage a massive empire, all that kind of stuff, but I do prefer a shorter but more intense campaign. As in, I'm not playing the intern button simulator. I'm not waiting for things to happen. I'm not waiting for empires to grow, all that stuff. I want to be engaged. I want to go do things every turn, and I want choices and consequences. Some of the best campaigns in Total War, like you look at Malachai's campaign, that's the reason it's so rewarding. You constantly have something to do. Now, of course, it would be ideal if longer campaigns also work like that, but, having these kind of shorter campaign sessions is very interesting. Will be a good question on how they're going to balance the campaign, but it would be great to, say, for instance, you start a campaign and you have access to all the types of units, of course, economy and all that limitations. But imagine having a campaign where you just start equivalent of Tier 5, right? So you got the entire roster available to you. You got battle cruisers, you got battleships, you've got battle barges, and you do have to use those resources in a campaign against the foe that also has that stuff. You're not wasting your freaking time, which is what a lot of sandbox strategy games do, by the way. They force you to always build up from scratch. Some better than others, but I would just prefer to start in kind of like an endgame situation and forced to make those decisions. But you might ask, well, what would be the limiting factor? It's called economy. So your economy could still build up stronger and stronger as you're playing the campaign, but ultimately you would start with really cool stuff. And I think it's important to understand they need to create an incentive structure for people to use lower tier units, as opposed to, we only use lower tier units just because we can get more of them. That's not fun. Like, you want to use both endgame units and lower tier units. Like, you kind of want that. But the problem with lower tier units, they're pretty bad later on. And the idea of chaff doesn't quite work in Total War at the moment. This is the problem of the 20 unit limit in battles. Now, I don't doomstack, but what I do is actually I just recruit more armies on the campaign. So I never recruit quality units because I can have free armies for quality units, and it's like, they'll do the job just as well, if not better, because of the way auto-resolve works. So that is something that I think Creative Assembly could work on. The final big point is they talked quite a bit about space. They didn't mention any space combat, but, and there is a but, they did show off ship models, and for those that aren't aware, these ship models match perfectly the ship models from Battlefleet Gothic Armada too. Like, you've got an Emperor-class battleship, for instance. You've got an Eldari battleship. I forget the exact name of it, but it's the exact thing, right? And what's interesting is they showed this art with turrets. Now, you gotta wonder, why would they put a picture there where they can show, like, this turrets can't swivel that much if we're not gonna have space battles? Now, one of the things, Chapter Master Valrak, Foil Man, if you want to call him that, what he talked about is that we might get another Battlefleet Gothic Armada game, apparently. So why is and it might get announced very soon. So why exactly is Creative Assembly not talking about space battles? They've talked about space, but they have absolutely not touched the subject of space battles whatsoever. Like, it's not like they haven't been asked about this. They have. It's not like they've said no. They haven't said that. They haven't talked about it at all. And that's kind of an interesting perspective. It could very well be the reason they're not talking about it is because they don't want to steal the thunder of another Battlefleet Gothic Armada game. Now, one could ask, well, okay, would they then have space battles? Yes, they would. And let me explain why. Because people tend to think of things like, oh, this is going to compete with Dawn of War, or it's going to complete if there is a Battlefleet Gothic Armada free. That is not how these things work. So, if you're a fan of Warhammer 40k, and there's a lot of people who are, you're not just going to play one game. You're going to play the game that you're most interested in. And if you're just interested in certain factions and ground battles, you're probably going to play Dawn of War. If you're interested purely in space battles, you're going to play, let's assume, theorize, of course, nothing confirmed, just Valrak. Let's assume for a second that we might get a Battlefleet Gothic Armada free. You might just play that. If you're interested in a grand scale war that combines both of those, yeah, you would play Total War. That is not a bad media strategy from Games Workshop, for the record. And yes, the individual companies would maybe prefer exclusivity on certain things, but ultimately, the gaming strategy or the people who control the rights are Games Workshop. And from Games Workshop perspective, it's not just that they want games that sell well, they also want games that further their ecosystem. So if you have games that, okay, this one's ground battles, this one's space, and this one's combined, but bigger scale, that would actually help Games Workshop and their entire business strategy. So always remember this. The companies who make these games, they're not the important actors here. It's Games Workshop. And Games Workshop has a lot invested online right now on 40k media. So Amazon series, Astartes 2, Warhammer Plus, video games, and there's a lot of them. Like, people just talk, it's like, oh, Dawn of War 4 and total 40k. No, there's a lot more than just Dawn of War 4 and 40k. Like, we're going to get Space Marine free, we're going to get Mechanicus 2, we might get a World of Tanks video game in 40k. I'm not sure I'm interested in that one. But anyway, there's a lot of things being done right now in 40k. Like, on every level. Shows, animated shows, maybe even a movie eventually. Video games, books. Like, I know it's weird to think about it, about Games Workshop from this perspective, but one of the things I would really mention here, for a lot of years they would do very little with the IP, but now they're doing a huge amount. And it's not just 40k. They're doing Age of Sigmar, Old World, so it's like their current media strategy has changed dramatically than where it was a couple of years ago. That's all I had to say. Questine signing out. Stay tuned for more.